innovative development, and I think we've got a unique program today, and it's our pleasure to present Andrew to you. So Andrew, if you'll take it away, I think we're ready to go.
All right. Thank you very much, Rich. Hello, everybody. You probably have not heard of me before, but I'm the HR manager at Innovative Development, like Rich just mentioned. I'm going to be presenting the topic of the records manager personality and strategic versus operational. And so as my title might indicate to you, I am not a records manager. That's not what I do for my profession. But I've hired quite a few of them and assessed them from a personality perspective. Excuse me. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, my background is in psychology. And I was actually a consultant for innovative development. They were my client at one time before I joined as HR manager. And fun fact, Rich Slaughter was one of the first people that I was involved in assessing. And back in those times, we used a variety of different personality instruments, including what's called the Rorschach inkblot test. And you may have heard of this test before, seen it in movies where a psychologist shows someone an inkblot, which is not a real, specific picture. It's just a blob. And you have to say what you see in it. So Rich, everything that he saw, and I cleared him, I could say this, everything had to do with golf. So we knew right away that he was perfect for business development and sales. So that's actually not really true. But and I wouldn't disclose the confidential information of the things that I learned from the assessments. But that's the kind of thing that we used to do before I joined in innovative development. But what we're going to talk about is a completely different type of personality assessment. I'm going to go over to our overview. To help us give an understanding of the different types of records managers, the different roles that records managers play, and how personality can impact someone's success or lack of success in that particular type of role. There's many different personalities that can fit into different roles. And so these are all generalizations, and keep that in mind. And that's the case for anything having to do with personality. Everyone is unique, and yet there are ways that we can think about personality that can help us predict behavior or understand behavior and put it in context. So what I want to do is just give you an overview of this presentation, what we're going to talk about, and then we can kind of dig into the agenda, and then we'll get into the details. So first, we're going to talk about the different types of records managers. And today we often have records managers who serve in two distinct capacities. The first is strategic leaders who set direction and policy. And the other type of records manager role is operational coordinators who ensure compliance and day-to-day execution. Now, there can be overlap between these different roles. One person could perform both of them. People could move in and out. And it all depends on the size of the organization, the culture of the organization, what they expect. But generally speaking, we can break down the functions of records managers into these. And again, I'm not a records manager, so I'd be interested to hear feedback if you want to put it in the chat where your experiences diverge or ratify the topics that we're going to be talking today. But this is based on my experience assessing people to serve in records manager roles and what our clients are needing in those roles. So as I mentioned, we use a lot of different types of personality assessments. But probably the gold standard in psychology for the last 80 years, since around World War II, they started to do this kind of research because it was important to be as efficient as possible in World War II during for the military, to see who and what personalities would be best served to serve in different types of roles. So that really jump-started the personality assessment field of psychology. And so probably the most respected model is the Big Five personality model, which can help us understand a lot of things about people, but one of the applications can be how you're going to do in a role, how you're going to perform in a role, the types of behaviors we can expect. And specifically, we can apply that to records managers, breaking it down between the strategic and the operational roles. So what can this help us do? It can help us align organizational needs with the right type of records manager. So if you're an organization looking to hire a records manager or create a records manager role, you're not sure what you need, you can think about the different behaviors and competencies that are required for your needs and your strategy for the organization, and pick or create the right types of roles and pick the right people to fit into them. And also it can help individuals who are trying to figure out the career path. Maybe you're in records management, maybe you're not, maybe you're considering it. And what could your career path look like by understanding your personality? So let's talk about the agenda. So these are the items that we're going to go over in order in the presentation. So we're going to start by talking about the Big Five personality model and what that's all about. Then we're going to take a self-reflection quiz. So if you have a pen and paper handy, or if you can go grab one real quick, there's going to be some notes you might want to take because we're going to take a self-reflection quiz. And you're not going to have to share your results. They're completely confidential. You can share them with me after if you'd like to. And then we'll talk about the strategic records manager in a little bit more depth, the operational records manager in more depth. And then we're going to put the two pieces of the puzzle together. We're going to take the personality models and we're going to take the records manager roles. And we're going to look at the ideal, in general, personality profiles for each of those roles. Now, don't take this if your self-reflection answers don't match up with what your role is now. That's not an indication. I'm not saying that you're not fit for that role. I would never say that because actual real-time behavior is the most important. But these can give you little indications when you're planning for the future and what to expect. And then we can talk about implications for individual careers and for businesses and what they're trying to accomplish. All right. So let's talk about the Big Five personality model. As I mentioned, this started in around World War II, and there was a lot of research done. This is why it's the gold standard, because many respondents have been involved in validating these tests and the reliability of these tests and how accurate they are. And what the researchers did, to give you a background, is to look at how we use language to describe personality. So people would say, oh, that guy's really outgoing or extroverted. This guy's really conscientious, and synonyms for those words. And psychologists clustered them together, and they created questions that could be proposed to people taking the test. And they found correlations between and clusters of personality factors. And the five biggest clusters that they found between all the adjectives we use to describe personality broke down into five different categories. And those are known by the acronym OCEAN, which is very helpful to remember. And OCEAN stands for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Now, not every personality trait is necessarily going to fit into this. This is one model. You may have heard of the DISC model, which is very popular, which breaks it down into dominance, influencing, steadiness, and compliance. That is more a typology model, not to get too detailed into it, but these are about traits, and you can measure these traits as being high on a trait or low on a trait. Whereas things like DISC, well, this kind of does that, but the Myers-Briggs type indicator, very popular, where you have a four-letter code. I'm INTP, if you know what that's all about. That's a very helpful model as well, but I find that the most reliable tool is the OCEAN model, the Big Five personality model. So let's dig into what each of these five traits are all about. And I think the best way to do that is for self-reflection. So questions that you all can answer about yourselves. So like I mentioned, if you have pen and paper handy, just put down openness and then 1, 2, 3, and then answer yes or no, simple, to these questions. So the first question is, do you enjoy trying new things or exploring unfamiliar ideas? Tend to be yes or tend to be no. A lot of these are going to have yes and no, so kind of lean one way or the other and try to make a decision. The next one, and you can take your time thinking about it or going back, I'll leave it up for a little bit. The next question, do you adapt easily to change in your work environment? When things change, is that easy for you or is that difficult for you to adapt? And the last one for openness is, do you often think of creative solutions to problems? The inverse would be that you try to rely on the tried and true methods or things that you've learned previously. But this question is asking if you like to think of creative solutions. If so, then put a yes for yourself. If not, then put a no. All right, so hopefully you've got your yeses and nos there. So now we're going to go right into the interpretation of what your responses mean. And again, this is just a tiny snippet of the actual test. So I wouldn't take this as absolutely reliable, but it can give you an indication of where you fall on the openness scale. So if you have 3 yeses, all 3 of those yes questions you said yes to, that means you're pretty high on openness. And that means that you're curious. you're imaginative, you're eager to explore new ideas and new experiences. If you had a 2 or a 1 in terms of yeses that you answered, you might be in the medium area where you're open to some novelty, but you generally prefer balance between the familiar and the new. So you don't like to be stuck in the old ways, but you'd also don't like to rush into new things. And if you had no yeses, and again, there's no right or wrong, so that's not like a low score, it's just an indication, then you'd be low on openness. So that means you're more practical, you're more conventional, and you're more comfortable with routine than you are with change. So hold on to your scores there because we're going to go on to the next one, which is conscientiousness, the C in ocean. All right, so here's the next set of questions. First one, do you keep track of details and follow through on commitments? Now, this one sounds like everyone wants to say they follow through on commitments, but it's helpful to really think honestly about yourself in a variety of different situations. Do you really follow through to its fullest? Again, no right or wrong answers here. Next one, do you prefer having clear plans and structured routines? So you like things to be structured, planned out, you know what to expect. And the last one, do others often rely on you for accuracy and dependability? Do you find that people are coming to you saying, ah, they can handle it? Then that would be a yes. All right, so we'll head over to the interpretation of conscientiousness. If you had 3 yeses, that means you're probably pretty high on conscientiousness. You're organized, you're reliable, you're strongly focused on goals and details. If you had a 1 or a 2, yes, number of yeses, then you're probably medium, dependable when it matters, but flexible about structure and rules. And then if you had no yeses, that means you're more spontaneous, you're more laid back, you're less concerned with planning or precision. All right, so so you can mark down whether you're high, medium, or low on conscientiousness. All right, and then let's go over to extroversion. Do you feel energized by group discussions or teamwork? Do you find it easy to start conversations with new people? And do you enjoy being the center of attention when presenting ideas? So I kind of rushed through those because people tend to have extroversion. They kind of know what they think about themselves when it comes to extroversion. So my hunch is that these are probably a little bit easier for you to answer. All right, we'll go to the interpretation. So if you had 3 yeses, that means you're outgoing, energetic, you thrive on social interaction. If you had 2 or 1, you're probably medium. You're comfortable in groups or alone, but that can shift depending on the situation. For an introvert like me, here I am speaking before, I'm not sure, from 41-ish, 40-ish people. It's not generally what I want to do, but when I get into the mode and I like talking about something I'm interested in, it's something that I can enjoy doing. And if you had no yeses, you're more reserved, more reflective, and you recharge best in solitude. All right. So self-reflection on agreeableness. So do you value cooperation and harmony in team settings? Is it you really want to work together with people in a team? Do other people's opinions matter a lot to you? And do you find it difficult to say no when someone asks for help? So take a moment to mark down your yeses and nos for that. All right, and we'll head over to the interpretation. If you had 3 yeses, you're likely high on agreeableness, compassionate, cooperative, and eager to maintain harmony. In any situation, you want people to get along. If you have 1 or 2, medium, you like to balance assertiveness with friendliness, depending on the context. And if you had no yeses, that means you tend to be more direct. You're more skeptical of people's intentions, and you're willing to prioritize self-interest over group harmony. Again, it sounds a little bit like a negative thing, but there are positive elements to all of these, whether you're high or low. And eroticism. This is the one that we'll talk about. Do you often feel anxious when deadlines approach? Do people generally need to earn your trust? And do you worry about making mistakes at work? I'll give that a couple seconds to make your answers. All right. So the interpretation for neuroticism, I was going to say that people tend to think of neuroticism as a generally negative trait, but it's not really. It can be very motivating to be more neurotic, even though the term sounds negative. So if you have 3, then you're high on neuroticism. It means you're more sensitive to stress, you're easily worried, you're vigilant, and you tend to be emotionally reactive. 2 or 1, you experience ups and downs, but you generally manage stress pretty well. And if you had no yeses, that means you're calm, resilient, rarely rattled by pressure or setbacks. So hopefully everybody got theirs locked in. You know whether you were high, medium, or low on each of the ocean factors. And now we will move on because we're going to apply this a little bit later. But first, we have to talk about what we're going to apply it to, which is the 2 main roles of a records manager. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, we can break down records manager roles into strategic and operational. So a strategic role is more focused on policy, or a program lead role. They tend to focus on governance, compliance with procedures and guidelines, with managing risk, with aligning the goals of records management with the strategies of the organization, and also aligning the strategy of the organization with the processes involved in records management. So some deliverables that you might see for a strategic role are developing retention schedules, updating them, making sure they're in compliance, making policy frameworks for how we're going to think about how we're managing our records and what our approach is, and conducting audits to make sure that everything is on the up and up. Versus an operational role, it's a more day-to-day coordinator, execution lead type role. So the focus is more on daily access. Who can get access to what records? How are we classifying those records? How are we delivering our services to make sure that they're available to the people that need them and not available to those who can't have them? And some deliverables there are developing a records index to track where all the records are and potentially linking to them. Training people on how to use the records index, where to store records appropriately, where to find them, and then maintaining the systems that are involved in making sure all this can happen. So that's a broad overview of those 2 roles. So we dig a little bit deeper into them. So a strategic manager, as I mentioned, is focused on governance, cross-departmental leadership. So they're involved in networking with other departments in the organization to make sure that everybody understands what's expected, what the policies are, and what needs to be done with the records, and how records management can support those departments. They also focus on vendor evaluation and risk management. So we're trying to figure out who you want to use as a vendor for your record software, or for, if it's physical records, where you're going to locate the records safely. And risk management, what are the risks that you're facing when it comes to records management, legal or exposure-wise? Cybersecurity is key. And then so we look at policy development, which supports both of these previous things, and alignment with the regulatory requirements. So how are we not just focusing on the organization strategy, but making sure that we're in compliance with the regulations? And then just focusing on long-term planning, thinking about how technology is changing, how our records are changing, how we're going to go into the future, what kind of technology we need to adopt. So that can be all bundled into a strategic manager type role. And again, people could be doing that and be doing the day-to-day, but we're kind of breaking them up into these two roles. So then if we look at the operational manager, it's more about process, execution, classifying the records. You need to train people, you need to troubleshoot when people have problems. You're going to be getting emails, you're going to be phone calls saying, I can't access my records, or I don't know where it needs to go. And making sure that everybody's being taken care of on a day-to-day basis, and reporting on it. Monitoring compliance, making sure people are putting the records where they need to go, and maintaining the records that are ready to be audited when initiated from the higher ups. And then user support, people that are using the software, teaching them how to use it, adopting the new systems, and you're also going across departments because all the records or many of the records are in other departments. So you have to be able to have a certain level of interaction with other departments to support them. So we'll go a little bit more specific to give you a sense of a strategic records manager sample of a day in the life. So the morning might be reviewing updates on regulatory changes. Seems like there's a lot of regulatory changes, a lot these days, and being able to adapt to them, stay on top of them, and respond if needed, or have a steadier hand if you don't need to make an immediate change, but being able to know the difference, and draft revisions to current records policies. Then in the late morning, you might be meeting with other departments, might be meeting with legal and compliance, aligning retention schedules with the risk requirements. In the afternoon, you might be presenting records governance strategy to executives and influencing and networking with people in other departments. And then in the late afternoon, you might evaluate a new vendor who has a sales pitch for you, or has a new solution that you might want to consider. Versus an operational manager, their day might look like in the morning they probably have a bunch of tickets in their email box or whatever system they're using to triage the help desk tickets related to who needs access and how should I classify this record, and things going along with the retention schedule. In the late morning, they might be training people on how to use SharePoint or other software. In the afternoon, they'd be updating, troubleshooting metadata fields. And in the late afternoon, compliance and reporting on things that have happened during the day. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what it looks like on the ground for these two different roles. So let's talk about the similarities and differences really quickly. So both roles need to be able to communicate effectively. They need to be able to set expectations, not just with their immediate coworkers, but throughout the organization. They need to be able to provide status updates. They need to be able to train people. Both roles need to have a high level of ethics. They need to act honestly in accordance with the policies, with the regulations that come from government or regulatory bodies, and just guidelines that are part of the organization. And also accountability is a similarity. They both need to be able to follow through with timeliness and with precision. Doesn't matter which type of records role you're in, that is key. But some differences here. Strategic managers, as you might have noticed, are more outward looking, more forward looking, thinking about the future, thinking about the risks outside the organization. They have to be more proactive. And operational managers tend to be more inward. What's happening inside our organization? How are people needing to be supported? How are people in compliance? And their present focus, what needs to be done today, and reactive to the situation. And strategy, we could say, defines the why and the what of what we're doing, and operations ensures the how we're getting it done. All right, so now this is the part that I really love. So applying what we learned about the OCEAN model, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, to the different roles. So from my experience, this tends to be the ideal breakdown for someone in a strategic role. So as you can see, openness, you want to have a high level of openness if you're in a strategic records management role. The reason for that goes to the strategy component, the forward-looking, the outward-looking nature of that type of role. You need to be able to lead change. You need to have new ideas, question new ideas, and adopt the ones that are good and reject the ones that aren't good, and have a future focus. So high openness is important for that type of role. Conscientiousness, again, it's high. This is almost obvious, I think, that someone who's in charge of the records needs to know where they are. They need to be accurate, dependable, reliable, punctual. Things need to be where they are, where they need to be when they need to be there. Extroversion. So this, you can have a mix. As I mentioned, you do need to influence stakeholders. That could be cross-department, that could be higher ups, could be external people, vendors, regulators even. And so a medium to high level of extroversion is important, but I won't say that it's absolutely necessary. You can adapt and say, okay, I need to kick it in. I can network when I need to. And then we have agreeableness. So I say the medium is probably the right balance for a strategic role. And the reason for that is you need to be willing to challenge the status quo, but you still need to influence people and be liked. You still need to support them. because most people will be looking at records management as you have to convince them that it's important, and they need to like you for that to be the case. You can't just be the hard-edged person who's, laying down the hammer all the time. So you need to be able to challenge them and let people know that things need to be done while still being liked. And so that's why I say that medium is ideal there. And then neuroticism, there's going to be pushback in your role. There's going to be criticism. There's going to be pressure. And being able to remain calm under pressure is a key factor of low neuroticism. So I would recommend low neuroticism is ideal. So then we take a look at the operational role, and there's some similarities, some differences you might expect. So openness is one of the key differences. So you probably want to maintain a medium level of openness for an operational role. And the reason for that is you need to maintain systems. You can't always be looking at, well, what if we did it differently? What if we tried this? There's not really time for that. You need to be able to adapt change as it comes. So that's the medium part. But you also need to be able to maintain the policies and the systems as they are. Conscientiousness, high. Just like for the strategic role, you need to be accurate, dependable, reliable, and punctual. So conscientiousness is really the key for both of these roles. Extroversion, again, you can be medium. You don't need to be high because there's less influencing cross department and outside the organization. But you do need to be trained to be able to train others. You need to be able to set expectations. But you're going to be working independently a lot. And so someone who really needs to be talking to other people all the time might feel a little antsy. Then we come to agreeableness, just like previously. You want to be, with a strategic role, you want to be compliant, but you want to be willing to disappoint others. When people come to you and say, do I really need to file this record in this particular place? You need to say, yes, you do. That's the policy. You need to be able to enforce that. And when people say, I want to have access to this record, and you need to be able to say no if they can't have access. So finding that middle ground there is key. And then neuroticism, interesting that, as I mentioned, neuroticism sometimes gets a bad rap, but you can have a little bit of neuroticism in this particular role, and I think it could be a good thing. So low to medium. And the reason for that is as the gatekeeper, if that is the role that you're playing in an operational role, you need to be able to be skeptical of people coming to you for requests. So, actually feeling okay, on your guard, questioning, vigilant when it comes to protecting the records, I think it is pretty healthy. So let's take a quick look. Let me check my time here. Yeah, pretty good. So we can take a look at these two roles side by side. So we see that the openness, strategic role, high openness is key to be able to think forward, but an operational role is more medium. For conscientiousness, we see both are high, so that's the same. Extroversion, it could be medium or high. High is more important when it comes to being able to influence people outside the department or the organization. And then agreeableness, you can be medium is probably right where you want to be. And then neuroticism, low for the strategic, but low medium for the operational. So we could kind of think about this. If someone's in an operational role and they're thinking, well, my next step is to move into a strategic role. This is where the Ocean profile can be illustrative to you and helpful when you're thinking about your next step. So thinking, okay, I'm really killing it in operations, in an operational role. Everyone looks at me and they can rely on me, and I'm ready to move up to the next level. So that's when you kind of want to think about where your comfort zone is, because there's such a thing as rising to the level of your own incompetence, where you rise to such a point where you're not comfortable in that situation. So if you're not someone who is very open to new ideas, it may be more difficult to move into a strategic role. It might be something that you want to foster in yourself. If you are not extremely extroverted, you have to think about, okay, if you're on the lower end, so say you answered 1 yes to the extroversion question, then you're a little bit further from the high end. And you might, question whether you really want to be out there networking and having to do all that. So it's a good question for yourself. And then agreeableness, if you're medium, then you're good to go. But when it comes to the neuroticism, if you tend to be very vigilant, it might be more difficult to move into, if you're like medium on neuroticism, more difficult to move into a higher pressure role where people are looking to you, they're pushing back at you, they're making public criticisms or private criticisms of you, and need to be able to manage that. And so that there's a little, and we're going to talk about in a couple slides about what you can do as you're thinking about your career in that sense. All right, but first we're going to talk about the implications that we can take from this for organizations. So when organizations are thinking about, or they already have a records management program in place, say, where they're going to add roles, that they want to hire new people, they have to think about recognizing the role distinctions when hiring and structuring teams. So if you don't have a records management, or it's small records management department, and you're thinking about what types of roles you need, you want to think about these different functions that they play. Maybe you don't have the budget or the need for having more than one person in records management. And you're going to find somebody who needs to play both of those roles, wear both those hats. Or maybe you want to have two different roles with two different people. So then the next step, once you've identified your roles and you're thinking about who you want to put into these different roles, then you want to think about what types of personalities are going to fit with these roles. So you want to align personality strengths with the role demands. And so we'll go back just to refresh. So if you're thinking about, we want to have one person, say, perform both of these roles, then you're probably going to look at it and say, okay, well, someone with medium openness may not be able to perform the strategic function, but someone with high openness can perform the strategic function, and they'll probably be okay doing the operational. Conscientiousness, if they're not high on conscientiousness, it's probably going to be pretty tough for them to do either role. And then then we look at extroversion, you're probably going to want someone on the higher end, but medium is acceptable and is okay too. And then agreeableness, it is going to work just fine. Being able to disappoint people, but also get people to like you. And neuroticism, you're probably going to want it to be low. So that's a scenario where an organization is going to hire one person to do both of these functions, and think about how there may not be optimal. It may not be optimal for a highly extroverted person to have a portion of their job which is very solitary and they're not interacting with other people. It also might not be optimal for someone who is only somewhat open to change, to be having to take on a strategic role where they have to think about the future state that we're taking the organization. And so that brings us to, okay, so once we think about what types of roles we want to fill and the types of personalities we want to fill them, then we have to figure out how we know that the people that are applying for the job, whether internally or externally, are going to be good fits for it. How do you know? I gave you a sample earlier of just 15 questions that give you just a little bite-sized snippet of where you fall on the different personality traits. But there are extremely credible personality tests out there that you might need some access to like a psychology degree to be able to, or you can find a consultant who can conduct that for you. But you want to make sure that it's credible. You don't want to just rely on, for instance, just the 15 questions I gave you. That's not something that you're going to want to use for a pre-employment assessment. You want to make sure that you're covered, if that's what you're going to do, that everything is reliable and credible. So one test that I recommend is the 16PF. That's probably my preferred test. It stands for 16 personality factors. And it uses the Ocean model, and it breaks it down even more to get at the clusters that I mentioned previously, which is there's these clusters of personality traits that fit into each of the openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Things like abstractedness and trying to think, reasoning ability. That test actually has a reasoning ability where there are actually right or wrong answers on it. So it's a really solid, reliable test that can help you get a sense of what someone's all about if you're just meeting them for the first time in an interview situation. Next thing is, when using these tests, if that's what you choose to do, you don't want to let the test pigeonhole people or limit their development. This is important. So tests can be misused, and I've seen it many times where people, especially when it's a typology test, and early in my career when I got interested in it, I really felt seen, if you will, by my Myers-Briggs personality type, the INTP. I thought it explained so much about my personality, and it does, but it's not everything. And oftentimes the most interesting thing about a person is the part of them that doesn't fit their personality type. So if you know anything about Myers-Briggs and you have a personality type, and you say, okay, well, this person's probably like this, and they probably do this in that situation, all that. But the most interesting thing is someone who can break out of that and trying to figure out why they are unique in that way, where they marry their type, but they also have this other interesting element that gives them that competitive advantage when they couple it with their core type. So that is just an example of not just saying, oh, well, the test said this, so I guess that's what you're going to do. So if you don't like the answers, the scores that you got earlier in this presentation, and your records management person, and you got low on conscientiousness, don't let that pigeonhole you. Think about it. Think about whether it's accurate, and whether that makes sense. But from an organization perspective, you shouldn't put people in boxes and say that, well, they can't come out of that, or they're not cut out for that, especially if they're already in your organization and you can observe them real time. You can see, how they behave in real time, which is always a better indicator than any test. Seeing people, how they react in real time is always the best. And along with that, you want to build career paths for people to move from operational to strategic, if it's appropriate, if the person wants to do it. And if they do, but the test informs you that maybe there's a leading edge where they need to grow in this area. Maybe they need to work on being less neurotic, for instance, if they're going to take on a leadership role. You're not ever stuck in any one area. It's only a measurement at a particular time. There can be growth. And so people can change. And I think an organization that has that leadership development program, like we do in innovative development, that can help people build the career paths and think about their next level, that's key. That's going to help your people. It's going to make them feel more aligned with your organization. It's going to help your organization because you're getting the best people in the right roles. You're going to be more efficient. You're going to be more effective. And I've seen it many times. So those are the implications for organizations. So now I want to talk about for individuals. So if you've been taking this or you've been listening to this presentation, you're thinking about yourself and you're thinking, oh man, I don't know if I fit into a records manager, or I'm operational, I'm thinking about strategic, but I don't know, if it's the right fit. The key is always to understand yourself. I presented the questions to you at the beginning. I don't know you. I'd love to get to know you if you want to have a chat after this. But you understand yourself better than anybody. You know yourself the best. So you think about how you behave in different situations. So if you're thinking about yourself when it came to work, when you answered those questions versus when you're at home, or when you're with your friends, or when you're on vacation. I like to think about vacation because that's when you're most free. Well, sometimes our vacations are very, go. We got to see a bunch of different stuff. But you tend to be that. Even that's a reflection of my own personality. That's what I want to do. So in I like to think about vacation. What you want to do? Do you just want to sit on the beach? Do you want to go from one thing to the next? Always have a schedule. That's a really good way to think about who you are at your core, not who you are influenced by the people around you or the expectations of your job or your organization. That can give you a really good understanding of yourself. But once you've gone beyond that, you can get other opinions. You can consult different tests, like the 16PF. Individuals can take that and get feedback from it. And career coaching, whether it's internal or external, whether your company provides that or you can do it on your own. Someone who can give you that unbiased feedback about your personality and what your goals are and how they're aligned. And then other people's opinions, people who know you, not career coaches, not tests, but people who actually know you. I have one question where I asked people to say what their critics would say about them if they were talking to me. And people oftentimes have difficulty figuring out who are my critics. I'm like, what would your significant other tell me about you, because they know us well. That doesn't mean that they're critics per se, but when you know someone really well, there's bound to be things that are people can be critical of. And so people who know you really well can give you fantastic feedback, and they may not feel comfortable providing it if you don't ask. So I think that's a key of asking people, making sure people know that you want this feedback. And can you experiment with behaving differently? Um, sorry, I got a text there. Can you experiment with behaving differently in your role? So let's say you're in an operational role, and you are thinking about moving into a strategic role, but you're kind of introverted and you don't know if you can really do that. So can you experiment? Can you find moments in your role where you put yourself out there? It's not something that you would necessarily do on your own on a daily basis, but say, can I try this? And what is it like if I do try it? If I try to behave differently than I normally do? And then you get feedback from that. That's something from therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, where you try purposely to act differently, and then you get feedback, and that alters your perception of yourself depending on the feedback. Um, so that can also help spur growth and help you figure out, maybe you're not there yet, but maybe you can be. But when you have those experiments, um, and you see how it feels, is that behavior change sustainable? For instance, I'll probably be exhausted after giving this presentation because I'm not an extroverted person. And so could I be giving 3 of these presentations every day? Probably not. That wouldn't be sustainable, but I can do it occasionally, especially when I like the topic. So I can experiment. I can behave differently than my normal default. But is that sustainable? Can you do that on a daily basis for years on end if that's what you're choosing to do with your career? And then, speaking of career, what do you really want from it? Do you want to go from operational to strategic? Do you want to be the person that everybody's looking at and saying, this person, the buck stops there? And with all the criticism and all the praise that goes along with that. And so I think those are helpful. So hopefully this was all interesting information. Hopefully you learned something about personality, about yourself, your own personality, and the different types of records management roles. As I mentioned, I'm not a records manager. So if I said things that don't true to you, I would love to hear that because I'm always interested to learn more. I would love to connect with you. I know Rich would. This is our contact information. If you have questions based on this, certainly, I think if we have questions in the chat, Rich can feel free to read any if there were any. If not, if you feel more comfortable, sending us a message through email or giving us a call, I'm always open to that as well. I love talking about this stuff, as you may be able to tell. See, Rich, you went off mute. Are there any questions, or do we?
Yes, there was one question, Andrew. If you're available, if someone is looking for a role in records management and they wanted to learn a little bit more about what you presented, would you be able to talk to them?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, anybody can reach out to me, and I'll give you the insights that I've learned, whether it's my years of personality assessment, or whether it's records management specifically, and if there's specific records management questions, so we can put you in touch with people who can answer those even from a firsthand experience. But yes, I'm very open to that.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions in the chat.
Okay.
So at this point, I just want to thank everybody on behalf of the IDEA series and for Andrew presenting. And just keep in mind to save the date for October 16th, which will be the next presentation in conjunction with the ARMA Keystone PA chapter. So at this point, we will sign off unless there's any other questions. And as I mentioned earlier, this will be uploaded on YouTube in the next 24 hours. If you'd like to listen or pass it along, there'll be a link.
And I do it for the second IDEA presentation. They have to register through ARMA Keystone chapter. Is that right, Rich?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
And everyone will be getting that. If you haven't gotten it already, you will be getting the invite and link and opportunity to register for October 16th.
All right. And I do want to remind everybody about some upcoming events. We are going to be having some people represent us and present at the ARMA Southeast Sunshine Conference, and that's in next February on the 19th and 20th. And so we're going to be involved in the day one panel. The topic is From Data Overload to Control, Tackling RIM and IG Pain Points. And then we're also on a panel on day two of the conference, Embracing Tomorrow, Innovating RIM and IG for a Digital Future. And we also have a presentation. I'm not sure which day that's going to be, but it's entitled From Rot to Results, Smart Strategies for a Leaner, Cleaner Information Environment. And that is presented by our very own Amanda Rohde and Cody Mortimer. So definitely consider registering for that with ARMA Southeast. And I just want to say I appreciate everybody's spending some time with us during your lunch break. And hopefully you took something valuable from it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.